Hello, good morning everyone, or good afternoon to those on the East Coast or farther east. This is Anthony Eggert. I am the Executive Director of the UC Davis Policy Institute. Welcome to today's webinar. This is a joint effort between the UC Davis Policy Institute and the Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways Program of the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis. I want to welcome all of you to the webinar. This is going to be about an hour long. I'm going to introduce the speakers here in just a second. And we'll have about a little over a half an hour of presentation, and then we want to welcome your questions. If you're interested in asking a question, you can do so by entering it into the chat box, which should be in the lower left corner of your ReadyTalk application. If you currently are not on, make sure to log on to ReadyTalk using the instructions that were provided in the invitation and the reminder. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speaker, who's going to introduce his center and the talk. This is Tom Turrentine, the director of the UC Davis Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Research Center. Take it away, Tom.
Thanks, Anthony. This is Tom Turrentine. For those of you who don't know about myself or the center, I'm with the PH and EV Research Center at Institute of Transportation Studies, and I also have Dr. Gil Tal here with me today, one of the premier researchers in that center who also studies markets with me. We've been at ITS, Institute of Transportation Studies, we've actually been looking at electric vehicle markets for over 20 years now, but since 2007 we formed this special center, the PH and EV Research Center, where we expanded research into markets, infrastructure, grid integration, and a whole variety of topics which I'll touch on some today, but mostly be talking about the market. Our scope is initially California, but we've been increasingly studying markets and processes throughout the United States and internationally. So we find ourselves at a turning point for transportation commercialization right now. It's been a very exciting last few years as electric vehicles came to the market, and things are diversifying, and we have a growing market to talk about. So today I'm entitling this talk, Catching the Second Wave of Electric Vehicles, and I'll explain that. So I'm going to go to my next slide here. Okay, I'm just learning.
You got to use the forward.
Oh, I got to do it there. Okay, just learning how to use this ReadyTalk. Okay. So first, some terminology for those of you who do not follow all the stuff on electric vehicles. There's a lot of acronyms, and we end up using those because there's some long titles. First, if I say ICE, internal combustion engine, that refers to sort of your father's Buick, which runs on gasoline, diesel. It could run on natural gas, biofuels, other liquids, or gaseous fuels. So that's your normal car out there on the road, 99 point whatever % of cars. Hybrid electric vehicles combine internal combustion engines and electric motors in a variety of designs. They have bigger batteries than internal combustions, but they do not plug into the grid. Actually, interesting when you do consumer research, because you still have a lot of people who think hybrids plug into the grid, but they still rely entirely on gasoline. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles are like hybrids, but they have much bigger batteries, sometimes usually 3 times the size, and they can store electricity from plugging into the grid at night. They can be plugged in often at a low voltage. Battery electric vehicles, or BEVs, use only batteries and electric motors, and they rely on the grid entirely. The extended range electric vehicle, EREVs, are like a PHEVs, but they emphasize electric driving. This is much like the Chevy Volt. The BEVX is a new category of vehicles with one vehicle in it, the BMW i3. You can get this, it's a battery electric vehicle, but has an extended range due to a small internal combustion engine that is added to the vehicle. And finally, We do use the term PEV, or plug-in electric vehicles, to include all of these electric-derived vehicles, PHEVs, BEVs, EREVs, and BEVX. So first I want to talk about the complexity of this market. The development of this market has many pieces to it, even more pieces than in development of a normal innovative product. We have regulatory goals here. We have to have a rollout of vehicles, a whole technology, and that includes moving through first, second, and at least third generations of vehicles. We have a broad range of types of vehicles that have to be that are being developed in the market. We've already mentioned. You have to develop some very specialized products for these vehicles, batteries, maybe carbon fiber bodies, at least aluminum, some sort of lightweighting, and new parts chains and assembly systems for these vehicles. You also have to develop the market demand, which we'll talk most about today, including consumer knowledge, experience, and even consumer desire for these vehicles. Some people want them, other people may not know that they even like these vehicles because they have no experience with them. You have to develop a whole charging infrastructure, and this is relatively complex with lots of locations, networks, and development of support from your electric utilities. You have to develop a whole retail system of selling these vehicles. While we have a retail system for internal combustion engines, lots of things about electric vehicles are different, and those retailers do not have much experience. And luckily, we're getting some innovation. And finally, you actually develop a whole new used market for these vehicles, and used vehicle sales are up to 2/3 of all vehicle sales. Just to remind everyone what the regulatory goals, the systems and incentives that we're putting together are. We do have in California, specifically the Air Resources Board Zero Emission Vehicle Program. We have the executive order from 2013. These are legal frameworks and goals for trying to achieve these market goals. But we also have incentives to push along that market. We have federal tax credits. We have state rebates to buyers. We have discounts, utility rates for electricity. We also have things like high-octane vehicle lane access. Starting off, though, I want to talk about how you develop an innovation market process. And here, again, I want to emphasize how complex this is. It could take decades of what I'd call adaptive policy. And then understanding how does this policy fit in with regulatory goals. If we look here at some other consumer goods and their introduction over a period of time, you look down at the bottom, take how many years it took to introduce telephones in the United States to about half the population at the bottom, and then how fast smartphones have been introduced to half the population. You have different rates of introduction of different types of products. In the middle, we see automobiles, and automobiles starting with a race between electric and gasoline and diesel at the start of the century. Well, actually diesel later, and with electricity falling out, it took almost 2 decades to reach half of America's population. Now, we don't really understand exactly how long it would take for electricity to move through and how much the population it would actually reach. But policy certainly has a big influence over that. We know about this process from lots of studies, what we call classic diffusion theory, that markets for such innovations are segmented into different markets. And the important point here, look at the big blue arrow, is that groups influence the next group. This takes place over time. We saw that the time span is different for different products, and we're trying to understand what that time span can be. And we're even interested in maybe speeding up that time span with policy. Just quickly, I'm not going to read this whole paragraph, but during these first few years, these first 2 to 3 years of the market, we've been selling to what we call innovators and enthusiasts. These are people who are willing to try out a new technology. If the infrastructure is not so great, they're willing to put up with problems. They're fascinated with the vehicle itself. They kind of can live with a few bugs or defects while the manufacturers are working those out. The second group we call, according to diffusion theory, we call early adopters or visionaries. These are people who learn from that first group of innovators and they go on to expand the market and influence the majority buyers. In some studies even have been called communicators. They tend to be the folks, the neighbors, the people at the church of the innovators who take on and try out this new technology further and tend to spread it to the rest of the market. I'm going to take some inspiration here to try to understand this process using a historical, not just the theory from diffusion, but look at one historical case. And I think the best case we have is the introduction of the hybrid market in Japan and California to find some insights into this process. And in Japan in particular, the market started early in 1997 with the first hybrid electrics and spreading to the United States, primarily California markets early after 2002, and then a new model of vehicle. So there's several things going on here. First of all, you have a market in which you're developing some buyers, and we saw from the diffusion theories that early market was these enthusiasts and innovators shifting to a second generation. We also have generations of vehicles. So generation 1 hybrids, for those of you who remember the first vehicles, looked a little different. They had a few problems. They rolled out into the market over a few years. And then they changed to a more advanced design in generation 2 vehicles. And finally, some people say that generation 3 vehicles are when a auto manufacturer starts to make profit. And that's when the market can expand more rapidly. Can the plug-in electric vehicle market follow a similar trajectory to hybrid electric vehicles? And to understand how this might happen, we have to study the following things. We have to understand what those generation 2 vehicles are like and what I'm calling wave 2 buyers. We have to understand household use patterns for these vehicles to help us develop and optimize the charging system which will be used. Remember, there's a lot of types of vehicles. I'll talk more about that in a minute. And so we're developing an infrastructure which has to service a lot of types of technology. We have a development process for the integration of these vehicles with our electric grid. How do they fit in to the circuitry and to the overall demands on that grid? They can maybe even improve the operation of that grid. We have to see the rollout of the charging systems themselves around the locations and parking lots and along our roads and the optimization of that at individual buildings and locations. The development of a retail system and a used car market, and finally optimal incentive systems that may have to last a decade or two even. One thing that's very different about hybrids is that plug-in electric vehicles come in a much wider range of technologies. I've already mentioned some of these. At the top of the screen, I have plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. These have smaller batteries. At the bottom of the screen, we talk about internal combustion engine range like battery electric vehicles, the example being the Tesla S. I'm sure all of you have heard of that, having a very large battery and a large driving range. So sort of from the top to the bottom, we're talking about the size of the battery. In the middle, we have also what varies across this because of the battery size is the speed of the charging. So vehicles with smaller batteries charge at a lower speed. At the bottom, the larger battery vehicles charge at a much higher speed. The vehicle in the middle is sort of new to the market. It is primarily a battery electric vehicle, but also can include a small internal combustion engine on board to extend the range of the vehicle. This is the BMW i3. There may be other vehicles in this category soon. So here's one curious thing about that. If you think if it's possible, one piece of good news, it's qualified, but the good news is that plug-in electric vehicle sales are actually much stronger than hybrid vehicle sales over the first 36 months for each type of vehicle. There are a lot more PEV models than there were HEV models, and there are some stronger incentives, although nevertheless, if you look over on the solid line, you can see that hybrid vehicles have at 36 months, we'd sold about 60,000 vehicles in the U.S., and at 36 months in the United States, 160,000 PEVs. So it's fairly good news. The monthly sales are dotted, and those vary a lot, but really the overall trend of accumulation is strong. Here's just to talk about some of these prices, though. At the top, in a very small area, you'll see my title, which tells us that the average price of a car in the United States is about $30,000. Most of our vehicles here are above that price, although after incentives the price is lower. We do see an increasing growth of sales in this area of higher priced vehicles, luxury vehicles. This allows manufacturers to, with higher profits in those vehicles, to put these new expensive systems. Let's talk first about the world market, though, here, before I talk about the U.S. market. It's a true world market now. Back in the 1990s when we began this, there was a lot of focus in California. It's now a world market with a lot of variation in vehicle and sales. Here's just to give an example of, I just note that here's the 10 best-selling vehicles in the world right now. The Nissan Leaf is by far in the lead with selling, and both in overall sales here, as well as sales in 2014 and sales in 2013. In 2014, almost a quarter of sales of PEVs were Nissan Leafs. Another vehicle that has come up very fast is a Mitsubishi Outlander. In the last few months has achieved good sales along with the Tesla in the last year and a half. Note that not all these vehicles are for sale in the U.S., only the asterisk vehicles. Here's world sales, another view of it. This kind of shows you the split between the main continents. We don't have many sales in Africa, Latin America, or the Middle East yet, so I don't report those. I actually have a little category there for Australia, but I should probably just throw that into Asia. Anyway, this shows a change in the market between the 2 years, 2012 and 2013. We have a world total sales of about 213,000 vehicles. There are actually more than that. There are a few countries which it's difficult to get reports from yet, so this could be a little bit higher number. But you can see that North America is almost half of sales, very important, and that being primarily United States, with sales relatively low in Canada so far. Europe sales have grown, although shrunk as a percentage, and Asia is showing some more rapid growth recently in this market. The total sales in the world, or total registrations in the world right here, there are about 500,000 plug-in electric vehicles in the world right now. This shows you how important the United States sales are here and the growth of the United States. Sales have been a little bit more tepid in many European countries that we'd like to see more sales in: Germany, France, United Kingdom, who are big markets for vehicles. Some smaller countries, Norway and Netherlands, actually have shown some significant growth and higher sales than much larger countries. Japan has always been a strong market, but if you can see here, China is showing some rapid growth in the last year. Just to talk a little bit about Norway and Netherlands, they're interesting countries and interesting markets. Netherlands actually had a very spectacular month last December with some very strong incentives, but their overall rate for 2014 now is about almost 5%. The vehicles which are selling are the Mitsubishi Outlander. Most of these vehicles are plug-ins. Most of the sales so far and the incentives have a lot to do with that in the structure of the market in Netherlands, although in recent months battery electrics have shown some growth. Norway is focused on battery electrics and has achieved a very high market penetration rate, and I'll talk about why that is in a minute. It's mostly among private citizens and has to do with incentives. If we look to France and Germany, for contrast, France market is not quite 1%, about the same rate as the United States. Sales for overall. They have some incentives, but it has not been a strong market. Somehow the incentives have not taken off. This may have to do with an emphasis on fleet procurement and other processes rather than the private market. In Germany, similarly, a very tepid market so far. Some vehicles, German makers are very involved. If you notice also in France, tend to sell mostly French vehicles. In Germany, selling mostly German vehicles. There are no incentives yet in Germany, and I think that this becomes an important point to kickstart this market. If we look to Norway, back to Norway, and talk about incentives and see what is important to consumers, we can see that free toll roads, no purchase tax, some free parking here and there. These are just a whole set of things that have encouraged Norwegians to attain this high market penetration of 15%. California has used a different incentive that's been very effective, the high occupant vehicle lanes. These are important on California freeways and in California dense urban areas and the long distance driving. You can see how important it is. Here's from some survey work done at Davis. We can see that some vehicles, actually it's very important to that person, may live out, have longer commutes. These smaller electric vehicles over here, which don't have such long commutes, the sticker has not been as important. But you can see also the areas, the Bay Area and Los Angeles in particular, the importance of these high occupant lane stickers. Household income of these people is a little bit higher who are using the stickers. This has to do with probably their commute and their job. And also, if we look at types of vehicles here, we can see that battery electric vehicles, the stickers have not been as important as it has been to the drivers of plug-in hybrids. Going to talk about the U.S. market next. Just a few quick slides. First of all, note total registrations in the United States since May are over 200,000 vehicles now in the United States. California will account for about 2/5 of that. Sales have grown from down here at the bottom in 2011 with two vehicles dominating the market to more 3 to 4 vehicle, a fourth vehicle, the Tesla S, being introduced in 2012. And as we move to 2013, we can see 5, 6 vehicles in the market. These Fords are similar, so you might count them. So there's a growth and a lot of sort of smaller segments with some not as serious market efforts and some manufacturers dipping their toes in the market at this point. If we look more specifically at California, we see this growth pattern. This is based on rebates in California. These are BEVs and PEVs, so we actually are showing 2 lines there. We could pile those up on each other. If you look at the overall sales of both in California, it's up around 5% right here, and so that puts us very close with Netherlands. And we have some strong incentives, maybe not even as strong as the Netherlands, but we've achieved this also given our regulatory framework, which is a bit stronger in California. Hybrids are up to about 10%, maybe dropping a little bit, maybe in competition with these vehicles. But also the used PEV market is just beginning. This is going to be very important as we move forward. Actually, we'll talk in another slide about the importance of leasing, and the importance of leasing in these markets speeds up the development of a used car market as vehicles come off lease sooner than they would from a finance package, often in 2 to 3 years, releasing more vehicles to the used market. And this will be a very important dynamic. We have a study which we're just beginning, and so we just offer you a few tantalizing slides about what's happening here. Here's some transaction values we've seen for these vehicles, and a number of vehicles coming to the market from different years. Now I'll switch to California, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about detail about the actual research we're doing at UC Davis. An important slide to show, we like to show in understanding the market, is how important income and new car buyers are as categories. When we think about the market, and if you look down here at the green bottom of the purchase pyramid, 2/3 of transactions for vehicles in the last 5 years, or purchases, were for used cars, not new cars. So actually new cars are a minority of sales. If we go up and look at the top two triangles, that's all the new car sales. And if you'll even look up here, a small group of people, only 7% of households, because they purchase more than 2 vehicles over that period of time, they account for a higher percentage of car sales, and they have a disproportional influence on shaping the market. So we always got to pay attention to those people. They're the ones, and that's who car companies pay a lot of attention to. If we look over here, this kind of shows you another view of that, shows you the income of those households, more specifically households who buy no new cars are in sort of the middle income category, and new cars household incomes are actually pretty high, especially those who buy 2 or more new cars. Over here we see a fairly high income. If we look at plug-in electric vehicle buyers we have been surveying over the last 2 years, they're even more affluent than regular new car buyers. If we look at down here, if you look at internal combustion engine, and that is the blue, this portion of the curve, the blue lines, and compare that with the, for example, the battery electric, you can see the income much shifted to the right here with higher income. And we didn't even, when we first did these surveys, we didn't ask for income above $200,000. Working in a university, we just weren't expecting incomes much higher. But if we go to the next slide, we can see that there are some indeed very high incomes in this group, and so we have a relatively affluent buyers, some very affluent buying these electric vehicles. Not everyone. There are still over here in the reasonable income maybe, or normal income, we see some plenty of buyers, but we do see a lot of buyers with very high incomes also. And one important facet of this is the influence of leases. With electric vehicles, there's been a big increase in leasing, and it's not distributed evenly across all these vehicles, but a very high lease rates in California compared to normal leasing. Normal leasing is about 20% of purchases in California, and here we see about half, and in some vehicles, very high rates of leasing. Again, leasing becomes very important as it releases a lot more vehicles sooner to the used car market. Also important is housing type, also connected to income, but also connected to the idea that you have to have a place to park your car at night and charge it. So we talk here about housing types and whether people rent or own their vehicle. And you can see just by housing type, detached homes are the biggest chunk of homeowners, and then attached homes like townhouses and duplexes, the red, and really multi-unit dwellings, apartment-like buildings being a smaller slice of those that buy new car buyers. And then renting and owning, also a higher influence of owning. This is an interesting aspect, the clustering of buyers. We do see that most of our buyers, and we do a lot of geographical studies of where our buyers live, what zip codes they live in, what neighborhood. And this map I pull out a lot just to show how clustered these sales are. In certain neighborhoods, these are affluent neighborhoods. Most of them tend to be along California's coast. for those of you thinking that maybe it's just California Democrats, actually, I happen to know this neighborhood through some friends, and it wasn't Democrats. It's a relatively Republican area. So it's not just politics, although maybe those are all Democrats. I don't know. They're in that neighborhood. But it does show you this clustering effect, very tightly packed, so that people would actually see their neighbors driving. And this was 2 years ago. So this has increased density in this area, and we probably have a lot more electric vehicles in this neighborhood. Some neighborhoods in California we've studied, for example, in the Bay Area, can have as high as 3% of all vehicles in that neighborhood. So given some of this growth, there is congestion also in the charger system. And this is one of the things we brought up, is the growth of the charger system. We face in California, given these market demands, and this is also happening in Netherlands and Norway, is some congestion in public chargers. People have chargers at home, but public charging, these are certainly at some workplaces. This is a heat map showing areas where we actually are having congestion at chargers. And so this will become increasingly a challenge as we develop the system, and we have to respond. You can't put the chargers anywhere. You have to put the chargers where they're needed, and we have to study very carefully and monitor the situation in order to put the chargers in the right location. We need a lot of data collection to do this properly. Also, battery electric vehicles are found in the urban cores, while higher numbers of plug-in hybrids are found in the suburbs. This certainly has to do with range issues, probably, of the vehicles. It could have something to do with income. This might be Tesla owners in here in the Bay Area, but we do see plug-in hybrids at a higher percentage in the peripheral areas and battery electrics in the core areas. One last slide before the conclusions, and I hope this isn't confusing. We draw from a number of data sources, but we do find, and a lot of surveys find, it's pretty common knowledge that the rate of participation in the market for PEVs among women is much lower for PEVs than it is in the market for all other vehicles, or internal combustion engines. Here we see that women are more than half of sales of new cars and half of sales of used cars. Women have been coming into the auto market still at a higher rate and have a greater influence in this one survey of 80% over that all purchases. So this is not about influence over purchases, but if we look at our surveys, which ask who owns these vehicles, we do see 30% women and reducing all the way down to an earlier study, even a lower rate of participation of women in this market so far. This opens up a possibility. This is actually, we should view this as an opportunity. Here is one of the biggest parts of the market that needs to be reached with vehicles. Now, some of you might be thinking that this has to do with the range of the vehicles and maybe with a battery electric, but actually these vehicles here don't have any range problems, and so this is more maybe income and technology issues that we need to explore. Conclusions. So some of these, I just want to, one caveat above the word conclusions there, we are using broad findings for UC Davis, and some of those findings may not be presented in this slide, so feel free to ask questions. We're trying to give you conclusions from many years of research here, and we may not be able to include all the slides. So some of these are high level, but I think important. Back to the lessons for the market so far. So for regulatory goals, systems, and incentives, diffusion theory and the history of the HEV rollout tells us this will be a decades-long, a multi-staged process that we need to map policies and product rollouts onto this step-like process. To reach the goals we have at the end of the line for climate change or other programs, we must have systems and incentives developed over the long term. They must be able to adapt to historical scale events and probably at least 3 generations of vehicle design. We have to have systems of data collection on the market. This is needed to reform adaptive management systems so as we evolve effective incentives and strategies over time. For the rollout of vehicles, we see that we have a widening window of products, and probably this is not over. We will see more products in the future given the integration of a lot of different technologies and as batteries develop. We may see larger batteries depending on battery prices. We know that PEVs offer a good consumer experience but are expensive technologies, so these will proliferate in luxury models. Also, we do see vehicle models in other world markets that could expand the market in the United States. Finally, some lessons from consumers in the market and about developing market demand. Given diffusion process, we know that these grow in regional pockets where there's affluence, where there's educated, what we call techies, the tech industries, and it keeps growing faster in these zip codes we've seen, where these enthusiasts are influencing their neighbors and coworkers. We also expect that current PEV owners are probably the likely next buyers, so they are still, as they come off their leases, or they're going to be buying the next vehicles. That's a big source of the market. Homeowners are still the low-hanging fruit here, and although there are new possibilities for people living in apartments, we know that homeowners have the income, they have the capacity for adding charging, and they will continue to be the core of market growth. Relying on innovators is not enough to kick off the market. We can look at Germany. They probably have plenty of innovators, but they need incentives to probably move that market the way we've seen in Norway or Netherlands. California and Norway show us that the private market is central, maybe even indirectly through company cars like Netherlands. Police and procurements can really help, but should not be primary. Actually, I'm missing a not in that sentence, sorry. And second wave must reach women buyers. We need to focus on this market and grow this market and understand that better through the retail networks, which are often, sometimes retail is heavily with men workers, and there aren't as many women in the retail sector. If this market continues strong, we'll be moving into this second wave of buyer, what we call visionaries, fast followers, and they'll depend on those innovators to experiment. Finally, on charging infrastructure, we think from looking around the world, I didn't talk about it enough probably, but public infrastructure development will not really speed up the market, but too little infrastructure will hold back the market. Infrastructure should follow the market, but not race ahead. Visionaries will need a more optimized infrastructure, meaning the next wave of buyers need chargers in the right locations, not where you can put it, but where it needs to be. We need to be better about finding the right places and rolling out the infrastructure in an optimized way. Finally, the retail system is evolving. We do have innovative dealers. Visionaries will need better customer support for that, but they are similar in income. The used PEV market is just beginning. We're just beginning to measure this. It will be very important, and we will see a very high percentage of leases, which will accelerate the growth of that market. And that's all for the slide. I entertain some questions here.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So again, this is Anthony Eggert with the UC Davis Policy Institute. So we do now have some time for some questions, and there are some questions coming in. Just to remind listeners, if you do have a question, go ahead and type it in the chat box in the lower left hand of your screen. I also want to remind folks that this webinar is being recorded and will be available if you would like to take a look at it in the future, both the audio and the slides. I will be asking the questions non-attributed, so I won't be using any names unless you want me to. If you do, just indicate that in your question. So I want to just kick this off with a question about sort of what are the major factors that appear to be influencing the uptake of vehicles across markets. We're seeing, a large variation across countries and even within countries across states. You've talked to some of this. Certainly, obviously, incentives seem to be one factor, but what are the other factors that seem to be important in determining sales traction?
I'm sorry, repeat that, Anthony. I was reading the questions. Sorry, I was reading our people's questions, and I missed the last thing you said.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and restate it here. And I also want to welcome Gil Tal, who's also joining Tom here. Gil is a senior researcher with the Plug-in Hybrid and Electric Vehicle Center, and he's also one of the key researchers on a lot of the work that was presented here. So the question has to do with what are the big factors that we believe determine sales. And you've mentioned incentives as being one of those, especially seeing kind of the dramatic variation across markets within countries and across countries. So besides incentives, what other things do you think are driving those differences?
Well, we've had a lot from the very beginning when we began this research, actually back in the early 90s, and we did it, I always go back to a drive test we held in the Pasadena Rose Bowl in 1991, or 92, it's 91 or 92. We had small electric vehicles, we had some methanol vehicles, we had some natural gas vehicles, in which we had people drive around the parking lot of the Rose Bowl. It was a really fun test, had a lot of graduate students. And my biggest lesson from that was actually the response of participants to the drivetrain of the vehicle. The way the vehicle, and these were very simple vehicles compared to what we're getting in the market. The vehicles are, we might even say, a premium driving experience using electric vehicles. Electric vehicles have a limited amount of energy on board, but the way they drove excited people. And so there was in marketing, they're always looking for something that delights the buyer. And this is something that probably does stimulate sales and will continue to push these battery electric vehicles into the marketplace simply because the driving experience can be superior to other vehicles on the road. A limited range, so we have a range of vehicles for different types of buyers. I think that's something that's also going to expand the market here. These are home recharging is something we always thought and wondered will be a potential bonus for some buyers, and we do find a set of people who just prefer not to go to gas stations and like to charge at home. For them, it's simpler, not for everyone, but for a good portion of the market, this can be a part of what pushes them forward, as well as the environmental benefits. Some people are excited by this, saving money on their electric bill. Yeah, we haven't put down the whole list of those benefits here, but there's a big, long list of why some people like electric vehicles.
So we have quite a few questions coming in here. The next one has to do with the issue of sort of, I guess, the income levels of different early adopters. And the question is that since most of the early adopters are affluent, are there things that governments can do to incentivize purchases of plug-in electric vehicles among lower and middle class earners?
Yes, there is, and I think that we have to be patient and take the time. For sure, the secondary market is coming in fast. 3 years old, even 2 years old, off-lease cars will have much lower price tag that will be more probably purchased by lower income households. But in general, we have to remember that new car buyers have higher income than the average household. And it will be very hard to sell new cars, plug-in or not, to people who are not buying new cars in general. 66% of the Californians did not purchase a new car in the last 5 years. And I don't know how much we would like to try and sell them a new car right now, plug-in or not. So I think it's just a matter of time.
Gotcha. So this is a question on one of your slides. Maybe you can go back to slide 13. So I think actually you can use that to.
Want me to do it?
Yeah. So I think this has to do with kind of when you start the clock. This has a question about, on slide 13, why not use 2008 or 2009 as the first year of PEV sales? Tesla sold something like 750 Roadsters in the U.S. in those years. We'll see if we can get the, all right, there we go. So the question is when to start that zero mark, recognizing that there were PEV sales prior to, for example, the Roadster was on the market back in 2008.
Well, we could, yeah, I mean, there were some vehicles on the market in a few areas. Those are pretty small numbers, though. Up to about 1,000 vehicles in many of these cases. We could go back, obviously, to vehicles in the 1990s. Tesla Rosers were not the first electric vehicles on the road. We had EV1s. We had EV Plus. We had a number of vehicles in the 1990s also introduced, but they were not introduced in a mass market. Most of them were being built in boutique fashion. So we could start that, but hybrid vehicles did start in 1997. So we could adjust for those few thousand vehicles, but there were very, very small numbers. I mean, we could even go back to some electric vehicle kit cars that were in the 1980s. So if we really wanted to push it back, there were a few thousand kit cars sold in the 1980s during the first oil crisis that were conversions. So I think we start with mass production. That's what I like to start the chart with, when full mass production, vehicles that are capable of being manufactured and sold, not in a few hundred, but in tens of thousands.
Great. A couple of questions here on infrastructure. So I'll just read this one here. It says, is the clustering factor also determined by location and availability of public charging infrastructure as much as localized residential incomes? So I guess maybe the question is what is affecting the clustering of infrastructure? Does the chicken or egg come first?
Correct.
It's Gil here. I believe that in California it's the chicken first, or the cars, or maybe it's the other way around, but it's the cars who are coming first, and in most cases the infrastructure is not the one who bring more sales when there are no cars around. The infrastructure, especially at workplace, have an important role as a showcase. When you are driving into a parking lot which had back in 2010 or 11 5 or 6 plug-in cars, and they all park in the same place at the entrance, everyone can see them. And if these 5 or 6 cars were all over the parking lot, no one could have seen them. So the infrastructure creates a high visibility of these cars and create more sales. But if we think about usage of the infrastructure, how important it was for the buyers of the car, it was not that important for the first wave, and it's not the reason for them to purchase the car in most cases.
Okay. So another infrastructure question in relation to DC fast charging. You mentioned in your talk about the importance of knowing where to put infrastructure. So this question is, what kinds of places would be the optimal locations for DC fast charge? And then just a commentary here. California seems to be plopping them down wherever it's easiest, and where there are retail tie-ins, not necessarily optimal. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Again, it's Gil here. So Dr. Mike Nicholas is doing a lot of research on DC fast chargers. We can probably spend an hour only on this topic. But in a nutshell, it's not that they just drop them wherever willy-nilly. It's just really hard to find the right place that will accommodate a DC fast charger. And we need more of those chargers in order to sell more BEVs, more full electric cars. It's a long process. We have to do it because right now the congestion prevents people from using these cars and getting the maximum out of the cars. And it's probably going to happen also in California. When the demand will go up, also the number of chargers will go up hand in hand.
What is your understanding about the way in which range and recharging opportunities actually affect the people's choice of a plug-in electric vehicle? Can we quantify this relationship?
Quantify the relationship. I think it's still maybe early in the market to do that. I think this is because still in our work, most of the people making choices in the market, even those making choices, are not fully informed about the vehicles. They're just, a lot of these people, this is their first vehicle. We have a couple of people who have, maybe they're on their second vehicle. So their experience with variation across range is pretty limited. Their ability to know, they've only been able to maybe try a battery electric vehicle with, 10 miles, or a plug-in hybrid with 10 miles, or a battery electric with 80. They don't have a full range of experience of how to use these vehicles. Actually, this will hold the market back. This slows the market so that the choice set for buyers is not fully informed yet. So, in a sense, trying to create an algorithm for this yet is probably a bit soon till we have. I always think of this book, The Signal and the Noise, that came out recently, in which he talks about having to have enough data. Our ability to predict baseball statistics is based on 100 years of statistics for left-handed pitchers. We don't have that yet. We only have a couple of years with a few products, and that range of products is expanding rapidly. Until consumers have fairly good experience with a range of products, and probably even within the current auto market, there are so many products out there. Many drivers we talk to, for example, have no experience with vehicles with high fuel economy. That was one. When we've interviewed households who have never driven a car with fuel economy better than 15 miles per gallon. They just don't know really what that means. And so until they have a range of product experiences, or we create, whether over the internet there's a way to we've been thinking about this, and Gil Tal will maybe talk about this a little bit, creating information products that allow drivers to understand the impact of range on their driving. Until choosers have that type of information at their fingertips to understand what it means, we won't get an algorithm in the market for that.
So a related question has to do with the implications of greater range for full battery electric vehicles. Do we anticipate that, and what might it mean for public infrastructure, or the need for public infrastructure?
I'll let Gil answer that one. They've been thinking about, or Mike Nicholas back to Mike, his ghost of Mike Nicholas is here.
And actually, Tom, studies from the 90s, they were talking about 100 miles, and I believe that the market is going for a little bit higher range than what we see right now with full electric vehicles. It's still not going to be, everyone will buy this Tesla F 300-mile range, but 100 or 120 miles will probably cover much bigger share of the market needs. So it depends on cost of batteries, but I believe that we will see more and more cars that will have a real 100-mile range in the future. How it will influence infrastructure, we will still need infrastructure, but we are not expecting people to, for example, stop at a DC fast charger every day on the way home or on the way to work. We do expect them to do it whenever they're coming out of their pattern, out of the usual trips, and that will be just the same with a 100-mile range car. If you have an extra trip, or if you just miss charging at home, or any other case that you will need this extra infrastructure.
Gotcha. Let me just say something about the market. Again, back to the range of vehicles available. We tend to think we're thinking about all the time about the range of the vehicle and what do people need and what do they want. And we tend to focus on battery electrics when there's this big arc of products that's being developed, everything from vehicles with 10 miles of range up to Teslas with 200. There's a big product window out there and some holes in it right now between. We have a lot of cars with about 90 miles of range, maybe one vehicle with 100, and then some vehicles with 200. There's a lot of territory in there. Battery prices have a lot to do with this, whether you're selling a luxury vehicle or a non-luxury vehicle. So the choice of vehicle, we have to keep our eye on that and realize that, for example, I'll just point out a car, the Mitsubishi Outlander has sold very well outside the United States in the last few months. This type of vehicle, which has is something of been very strong sales in crossover SUVs in the United States. It has good profit. So this type of vehicle, combined with a battery electric, with a plug-in hybrid, giving it 20, 30 miles of range, is a very attractive product. So think about the whole product package. What is available to the customer? What are they getting in the vehicle? And as those come into the market and fill up, there's a market segment that's growing very strong in the United States, and suddenly you have a technology which complements that market segment, and so we will see growth in that. And then as those develop over the first and second generations of vehicles, and battery prices begin to come down as the volumes of those vehicles come up, then we see ranges maybe creep up into what we think, or if you really are interested in battery electrics, 100, 120 miles, 150 miles, it becomes affordable.
So a question here about the current market for hybrid electric vehicles. So you use that as an analogy to look at, a comparative analogy to look at the sales of plug-in electric vehicles. There's a statement here that suggests that the HEV market is declining as the number of HEVs on the market is expanding. I don't know how long that trend has been in existence, but the question is, what do you see that do you see that as a trend, and what it might mean for the analogy for PEVs?
So I'm watching that trend. It's quite interesting. Of course, this market segment has been dominated by the Prius, Toyota Prius. It's been nearly half of sales around the world, and that we have to watch what happens with the Prius brand, and you see decline of it's kind of an aging product. It needs some refreshing, and that's having some impact on the market right now. That's sort of typical market dynamics. It's not really as much about hybrids. It's really about the Prius right now, I think, or at least I want to see what is done with that product. It's ready for refreshing. Does that become important? Some of those other products actually are doing quite well. For example, Ford hybrids their market shares are growing, and other hybrid markets not quite as fast. The sort of dominance the Prius has maybe even held back. Well, I'm kind of thinking that we'll see that market dynamic shift a little bit. There is a lot of competition from some very high fuel economy internal combustion engine systems now that make those. There's stronger competition there, but I think that we have there's reasons in that product line to find encouragement. Although I think plug-in hybrids, given electric drive, and my earlier comments about electric drive show that actually there's some strength in hybrids which begin to incorporate larger batteries and the performance characteristics of those vehicles.
Great. So actually we're coming to the end here of our hour, and I want to invite just any sort of, we did get a number of questions that we didn't get a chance to answer. To the extent that we are able to, we can post some information or some relevant research to those questions on our webinar website, which you should have in the announcement. And also we got a number of questions on related topics, including some on hydrogen and fuel cells. We will be having future webinars on those topics, so we'll hold those questions and hopefully be able to address those in future webinars, which I would encourage you to keep a lookout in your inbox for invitations to those. But I guess maybe just as a closing for both Tom and Gil, if you had to sort of leave folks with one key takeaway message as it relates to the PEV market, where we're at today, what would you want people to really remember from this talk?
Well, I entitled this Looking to the Second Wave. I'm pretty optimistic about this next segment of the market. We've really got vehicles on the road, 500,000 electric vehicles. I've been in this for a long time, over 20 years, and I'm pleasantly surprised with, some people probably, you always hear something in the Wall Street Journal or something else that, the market's failing, and another person's excited. I'm optimistic, although I see there's a long time frame. So I'm optimistic, but I see the growth of the market not immediately going to the main markets right away. Growth in luxury markets, and things are moving along. I'm happy with what's happening.
I think that, again, as Tom said, it's a long run, but as we saw in Germany and other places, you have to have the starting point, this kickstart of incentives, and then think about how to change and adapt for the long run. So policies have to both think about how to start the market and then how to help it grow before we leave the market to do its role in the future.
All right, thank you very much. And again, thank you to all of you for taking time to listen in today. Hopefully you found this informative and useful. Again, want to welcome you to keep an eye out for future webinar announcements. Hopefully within the next few weeks you'll be seeing an invitation for our next webinar. Again, this is Anthony Eggert with the UC Davis Policy Institute. This has been a joint effort between us and the Sustainable Transportation Energy Pathways Program of the Institute of Transportation Studies at Davis. Thank you all, and have a good day.